Greetings friends, I'm Baron Multi, here to show you a game by the name of The Consuming Shadow. It was released in 2015 and developed by Yahtzee Croshaw, who you might be more familiar with as the guy behind Zero Punctuation. And it's a survival horror game where the goal is to fight your way through procedurally generated dungeons and piece together a banishment ritual that will allow you to prevent an evil god from invading the earth. Which I think is as relatable as stories get, personally. Now, I wanted to showcase this game because its rather mediocre art means it's often overlooked by a lot of people, but hopefully with the help of the footage from my last run, I can illustrate that this game is actually quite good. I did this run with about 10 hours worth of experience, give or take, and what you're witnessing there is the progression system, whereby you get experience at the end of every run based on how well you performed, and that goes towards your levels, and every time you level up, you get awarded with another birth star that you can place on this map right here, which is randomized every game, so you can't just pick the same pattern every run, you have to mix it up a little bit. Every constellation gives a specific bonus, and the closer you are to the center of that constellation, the bigger the bonus. Now, as you can see, sometimes there are constellation clusters, so you can try to maximize your stats by trying to go for the best combination you can find. Some of these are actually very strong, but you're gonna need them, because this is not an easy game. No. So we've started now. You're gonna see the map screen in a moment, which will be very familiar to you if you've played FTL Faster Than Light. You always begin in northern England, and your goal is to get to Stonehenge because that's where the banishment ritual has to be performed. And again, just like in FTL, it's a horrible idea to just make a beeline for it, because you're gonna be horribly unprepared. The towns are randomly generated with vaguely English-sounding names, and they can either be nice towns or evil towns that have been taken over by the Shadow. Nice towns are mainly for healing and for buying items and supplies, so since you don't start the game with much cash, I just make my way to the nearest corrupted town. Which means a dungeon, procedurally generated for your convenience. There's a lot of world building fluff text like that on screen right now, but I'm gonna skip most of it, even though it's pretty well written, because I've already read most of it, and I don't want to spoil it for everyone, so if you want to read it, feel free to pause the video. The objective in this dungeon is to find and destroy a monster nest. Now, pretty much every objective in every dungeon boils down to bumble around until you stumble upon it. Every time you enter a room, there's a chance that a monster like this one will be spawned, as well as a chance for an item pickup that can either be supplies, something you can equip, or a clue, like in this case. The clues bring to the table one of the more interesting aspects of the game, which is the investigative elements, whereby you have to do some actual deductive work by deducing, using these clues, who the invading god is using this table that the game helpfully provides, where you can organize and make links between your different clues. Every game involves 3 different gods, one of which is obviously the invading god, but there's also one of their allies as well as one of their enemies. So for example, the clue I just got says that Biala hates the god associated with the color yellow. So if I later got a clue that the yellow god had an ally that wasn't Biala, then I could know for a fact that Biala is not the invading god because he has no ally. And this is important because the banishment ritual always involves the rune of the invading god, so you have to know which one it is. Now we just found a set of keys, which is another kind of item that can be spawned in a room, and that allows you to unlock every single locked door in that dungeon. Another way to open locked doors is to use lockpicks, which can be found as random pickups. But in my experience, the vast majority of dungeons have a set of keys you can find, so I highly recommend looking everywhere first, because it's pretty infuriating to waste your lockpicks and then go 3 rooms further and discover the set of keys. In fact, thinking about it, because the dungeons without a set of keys are so few and far between, I found myself using very few lockpicks, and when I did need to use them, I usually had a ton of them lying around. So I'd say the lockpicks are poorly balanced, if not unnecessary. Something that isn't unnecessary, however, is ammo. Now, I just fired 2 standard rounds at this lovely creature, but there are also 2 more varieties of bullets. There are armor-piercing rounds, which do, I think, double the damage of the standard rounds and pierce all enemies. And there are hollow points, which I think deal triple the damage, but these don't pierce. But in most cases, your gun is your most powerful combat tool, and as a result, bullets are a very important resource. In fact, when I'm placing my birth stars at the start of every run, one of the most sought after bonus for me is the additional ammo capacity. You can switch at will between different types of ammo, and because bullets are so valuable, you'll have to get acquainted with the melee combat a lot. Which there isn't much to say about, really. It's a single button, it has very limited range, it does decent damage, but its effectiveness is highly dependent on how dangerous it is to get close to your current foe. And we've just received a text from the Ministry of Occultism. Texts like that are basically random events you get while driving. Sometimes they're just fluff text or hints the game gives you. Sometimes opening them gives you a small hit to your sanity. But sometimes it will also make it go up by a tiny amount or give you a handful of money. I always roll the dice and open them, but depending on your playstyle, maybe you're more risk averse than I am and you'd prefer not to. Here we have the medkit, which is your primary source of healing, which, if memory serves, can heal up to 40 health, and it can only be refilled by paying £15 in Nice Town's hospitals. You can also look for supplies to purchase in Nice Towns, which is what I'm doing right now, and I just happened to find a Lucky Charm, which is a very good item to get early on, so I decided to purchase it, because it increases the odds of enemies dropping loot, so its usefulness increases the earlier you get it. Most items have very strong effects, but you can only have 3 of them equipped simultaneously. And here we have another random driving event. Apparently I just hit something on the road and I have a choice between driving on or finding out what I hit. Turns out it was a person that I murdered. Fortunately, I get to take the money that was in his pockets, but unfortunately I get a big hit to sanity. Unlike health, you don't tend to lose a lot of sanity very quickly if you're in a bad spot. However, unlike health, sanity is extremely hard to get back up once you've lost it. Some events can give a little bit of it back, and there are some things you can do in dungeons that will also give a tiny amount. But for the most part, the sanity you lose is gone forever. And having low sanity is not a good time. Because as it's getting lower, you start getting different insanity effects that range from being annoying to extremely disruptive. No doubt we'll get to see some of them later, but in general, you want to avoid sanity losses like the plague. I'm now in my second dungeon of the run. Incidentally, dungeons get progressively harder as you progress through the game, and they do so mainly by increasing in size and spawning stronger and stronger enemies, as well as stronger variants of the earlier enemies. Something you've probably noticed by now is the very low visibility that you have in this game. And I think by itself that's fine, it helps bring about a more oppressive and Lovecraftian atmosphere. But one thing that annoys me about it is that sometimes the game will spawn an enemy behind you if you run towards the other side of the room as you enter. And you can leave freely when there are enemies, but your sanity takes a hit if the enemy inside is still alive. So when you're trying to move fast, it can be slightly irritating to have to either double check the room or just cross your fingers that no monster spawns behind you. So we've completed the second dungeon, and then the fun begins, because I have a so-called hunter monster on my tail now. These are unkillable enemies that have a chance to spawn after you complete the dungeon objective, and they will follow you in every room, and you can shoot at them. It will make them recoil, but it won't kill them outright. So the only thing you can do about them is leave the dungeon as fast as you can, but that means you have to kill normal enemies you encounter on the way out very quickly if you don't want to take the sanity hit from leaving the room with them inside. Although mercifully that penalty doesn't apply for unkillable monsters, which would be quite unreasonable. Getting back to your car at the end of most dungeons, including this one, will give you part of the banishment ritual. It's composed of a random arrangement of 4 runes, one of which will always be the invading god's rune, which is why we need the clues in the whole organizing table in the first place. Here's another random event, as well as an insanity effect. Yes, sometimes your options will be swapped for a kill myself button. Pressing it leads to a quick time event where you have to click the mouse as fast as you can to get the gun away from yourself. It's fairly generous at first, but it gets harder every time it happens, and the option appears all the bloody time when your sanity is low. So, generally, not a big threat to your run, but it can catch you off guard, especially at low sanity. The game has controller support. I play it with keyboard and mouse, but both are perfectly fine, it's just a matter of preference. Something I haven't mentioned yet is the spellcasting menu. Some of the random pickups you can get are spells, some of which have very useful effects. But spells cost sanity, so I tend not to use them much. What I do cast are the runes that you can find randomly drawn on the walls like that, because they have a chance to give you a small amount of sanity back when you do, as demonstrated just now. But getting back to the controls for just a moment, one rather nitpicky complaint I have with the keyboard and mouse is that in the menus, if you hover over an option with your mouse and then move your pointer, the option remains selected, so if you misclick your next option, you might find yourself clicking the wrong button. It's by no means a large annoyance, but I wanted to expose it nonetheless. But something else that is very far from an annoyance is the sound design. It deserves special mention because I think it's one of the greater contributor to the horror atmosphere of the game. The music, the ambient sounds, and the noises the enemies make are pretty fantastic. The enemies make some fittingly vile and gruesome noises, and there's this constant eerie background tone that really adds tension to the game. Now I'm sorry, but I have to vent a bit about the enemy in this room, which I think is the worst enemy in the entire game. It looks like some kind of pendulum. It moves very slowly and predictably, it has no ranged attack. It's just a question of keeping out of reach and meleeing it with the right rhythm, and if you don't get the right rhythm, it will just flat out take some of your health away. And it's a very tanky enemy, so rest assured you will have plenty of opportunities to mistime your attacks. Overall, the enemy variety is thematically consistent and has some nice variety to it, but this one, can't say I'm impressed by it. But hey, this one did give me a status effect, so now I have a reason to talk about them. There are 4 squares under your sanity meter, one for each possible status effect. The first one is anxiety, which you might randomly get anytime you lose some sanity. It makes your character shake, thus making your aiming very inaccurate. I think it's the only status effect that goes away by itself with time. The other 3 can randomly occur anytime you lose some health. Right now I have the bleeding effect, which means my health steadily ticks down while I'm driving, which is a very nasty one to get if you're far from a nice town, because the only way to get treated is to visit a hospital. That's also the case for the other 2, by the way, which are broken leg and broken arm. To get rid of them, you must visit a hospital and pay a small fee, which I think is £10 if memory serves. The syringe on screen just reminded me that you can inject illegal drugs, and yes, that's actually what they're called, illegal drugs, and they will give you a small boost to your sanity, but beware. The boost is temporary and you start building tolerance, so every time you take some more, the boost gets smaller and smaller. You can see my health ticking down right now from the bleeding, thanks game. 47 hours left. The game gives you 60 hours to perform the ritual. That might seem like a generous amount, but if you don't get lucky with your clues or if you're ill-equipped to fight the final dungeon, it's really not that much. I think many people might criticize the game for not having much variety in its combat, but I think it's perfectly fitting for this game, and here's why. The Consuming Shadow isn't about a badass hero fighting evil. It's about being ill-equipped and way over your head, but trying to save the Earth nonetheless with whatever limited tools are available. About making do with what you have. And in this context, I don't think having many means to defend yourself would work very well. It would remove a lot of the tension of this game, which is one of its strong points. I mean, even after several hours of playtime and having beaten the final boss 2 or 3 times, I'm still looking forward to my next run. The combat isn't really the main focus of the game, and I don't think its simplicity distracts from what's good about the game, like the feeling of unsettling oppression and the Lovecraftian setting, as well as the satisfaction of figuring out who the invading god is by pulling together all your clues and figuring out how they relate to each other. And even if you can't figure it out, one of my favorite moments in this game was when I reached the end, but I didn't have enough clues to figure out which of the 2 gods I suspected was the invading one, and I was too short on time to fight another dungeon, so I just decided to take a guess for the banishment ritual, and I guessed right, and I finished the game. And that relates with what I was saying about this game being about making do with what you have, because many games just wouldn't let you enter the final boss if you hadn't jumped through a number of arbitrary hoops. I find this to be very immersive, and that's why I recommend this game, and I encourage you to look past its graphics and deceptive look of oversimplicity, and instead see it for what it really is. A tense and immersive Lovecraftian survival horror, with great writing, great gameplay design, and above all, great atmosphere. Also some nightmarish creatures I dearly hope never to see in real life. Like this one right there, relevant. Please keep your offspring to yourself, madam, because they are dickheads. I should mention there are various challenge modes you can select if you want to make the game even more unforgiving. And there are unlockable characters. There's one you unlock after beating the game once, and it's basically a shorter game mode. As in, the gameplay is the same, but you start the game with lots of supplies and the full banishment ritual already unlocked. And to balance that out, you only have 24 hours to perform it. I have it on good authority that the other 2 are unlocked through random events, and that they have slightly different gameplay styles, but I'm afraid I've unlocked neither, so I can't offer any useful comment on that front. That said, if you like survival horror and the replayability that Proc Gen brings to the table, then this game is definitely for you, and I'm happy to report it plays better than it looks. The Consuming Shadow is available on Steam for a very reasonable $9.99 USD or your regional equivalent. Thank you for watching. This has been Baron Multi. Remember, you're always welcome in my barony, where I hope to see you next time.